The smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air, mixing with the faint scent of paper and old dust, the kind that clings to file cabinets and forgotten folders stacked in dimly lit corners. My desk lamp hummed, its yellow light carving out a small circle of clarity in the otherwise shadowed room. It was late, so late that the ticking of the clock on the wall sounded less like time passing and more like a reminder that every second slipping away was one I'd never recover. I sat there with my first real earnings in my hands, the crisp edges of the bills scratching softly against my skin, and I realized something that would never leave me. One stream of income is a fragile thing. It feels solid at first, like a rope you can cling to, but the moment it frays, the ground beneath you opens. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive in. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. I grew up watching my parents count coins at the kitchen table. The kitchen smelled of boiled potatoes and cheap detergent, the kind that left your hands dry and cracked. I remember the way my father's eyes would fix on the small pile of change, as if staring long enough might somehow multiply it. In those moments, I understood the weight of money before I even had the words for it. And when I was old enough to earn my first few dollars, mowing lawns, delivering newspapers, I held them close, not just as proof of effort, but as a shield against uncertainty. At first, I believed in the myth of stability. Get one good job, climb one good ladder, hold on tight. But ladders can collapse. I learned this when my uncle, who had worked 20 years at a factory, came home one day with a silence heavier than words. The factory shut down, and so did the life he thought he had secured. That silence haunted me, and I swore I would never rely on a single stream again. Building multiple streams of income was not about greed. It was about survival, resilience, and freedom. The first time I tried, it was clumsy. I had a small business idea, something simple, something almost laughable now. I sold refurbished radios, pieces I picked up cheap from flea markets, repaired with shaky hands, and resold with a smile that was half confidence, half prayer. The profit was tiny, barely enough to notice, but it was proof. Money could flow from unexpected corners if I opened enough doors. Every step smelled of risk. I can still recall the metallic tang of fear in my mouth the day I invested my savings into a second venture. My hands shook as I signed the papers, the pen scratching across the surface like it knew I was gambling with my future. But risk, I discovered, is the gatekeeper of abundance. If you fear it too much, you stay where you are. If you respect it, you learn to walk past it with steady steps. The streams grew slowly, like cracks in ice that widen under pressure. One became two. Two became three. A side hustle that started as a whisper became a steady hum in the background of my life. Some failed miserably. I remember nights staring at spreadsheets that made no sense, my reflection ghost-like in the computer screen, whispering to myself, "What have you done?" Loss taught me as much as gain. Wealth is not a straight path. It is a river that branches, sometimes flooding, sometimes drying up. To survive, you must learn to read its moods, to step where the current is strongest, to plant where the soil is wet. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. The truth is, multiple streams of income are less about the money itself and more about the time they buy. When you wake up in the morning and know that even if one source dries up, another continues to flow, you breathe differently. The air feels lighter, the coffee tastes richer, the world opens. That kind of freedom is not bought overnight. It is built, brick by brick, decision by decision, often in the quiet hours when the rest of the world sleeps. And yet, even as I built, I never stopped hearing the ticking of the clock. It was always there, in offices lit by neon after midnight, in cafes where the smell of roasted beans clung to my jacket as I scribbled plans on napkins. The clock reminded me that income streams were not just about surviving today. They were about buying back tomorrow. The first real breakthrough came when I learned to separate work from ownership. A job pays you once. Ownership pays you again and again, long after you've left the room. That was the moment I stopped trading all my hours for dollars and started planting seeds that could grow without me standing over them. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. But the journey was never clean. For every stream that flourished, another dried up. For every win, there was a lesson carved out of loss. I learned to see money like water. It must be directed, contained, and respected. Leave it idle, and it evaporates. Guide it, and it nourishes everything it touches. I still remember the weight of that first small victory, the hum of an old fridge in my rented apartment, the glow of a single lamp on a stack of bills that for once were fully paid. I exhaled, and for a brief moment, silence filled the room. That silence wasn't emptiness, it was peace. But even in that peace, I knew, never rely on one stream. Build many. Trust none completely. Protect your time above all. And so I kept building. The city outside my window never truly slept. Even in the dead of night, when the streets looked deserted and the lamps cast their pale orange glow onto cracked sidewalks, I could hear the distant hum of engines, the occasional shout of a passerby, the faint rattle of a train cutting through the darkness. Those sounds became the backdrop of my work, the reminder that the world was always moving, that money was always flowing somewhere, even if not toward me yet. I would sit at my desk, the keys of the old typewriter clicking like a heartbeat in the silence, drafting plans, scratching numbers, imagining streams of income that did not yet exist. It began as survival, but turned into obsession. I could not rest with just one path. I had seen too many people, too many families, collapse when that one path crumbled beneath them. The memory of my uncle's silence, of my father's weary eyes over coins on the kitchen table, became fuel. I promised myself I would never allow my life to balance on a single fragile rope. The first side venture beyond the radios was small writing jobs, copy for brochures, short articles for local businesses. The smell of fresh ink from print shops became as familiar to me as the bitter sting of black coffee. My words turned into invoices, my invoices into small payments, and those payments into confidence. The beauty of writing was that it flowed from anywhere. It demanded no factory, no warehouse, just my mind and my hands. But I wanted more than survival. I wanted streams that could flow while I slept, while I walked through the quiet streets at dawn, while I stood staring at my reflection in a darkened shop window, wondering who I was becoming. That's when I discovered the power of ownership, buying something once and letting it work for me again and again. I bought a vending machine with the little savings I had scraped together. It was rusty, loud, and stood in a dusty corner of a laundromat. But every week when I emptied its coin box, I felt the thrill of money that came without my constant presence. The coins clinked in my hands like a secret rhythm, a reminder that income could be automated, multiplied. Still, failure shadowed every step. A partnership in a small clothing resale business went sour, and I lost almost everything I had reinvested. I remember the bitter cold of that winter, standing in an empty store with shelves half filled, and my breath visible in the air because we could no longer afford to keep the heating running. The air smelled of dust and broken promises. Yet even then, I told myself, this is tuition. Loss was a teacher that charged expensive fees, but the lessons carved themselves into me deeper than any book ever could. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. I learned to diversify, not just in streams, but in types of streams. Some were fast and risky small businesses, trading ventures, investments in markets I barely understood at first. They came with the rush of adrenaline, the taste of iron on my tongue, as I signed papers and prayed. Others were slow and steady savings accounts, rental income, intellectual property. They were less exciting, less dramatic, but their quiet drip was just as essential as the roaring streams. Over time, I realized that building multiple streams of income is like building a symphony. Each instrument plays a part. Some scream, some whisper, some hold the rhythm in the background. When one falters, the others carry the melody forward. The trick is not to demand perfection from a single note, but to keep the entire composition alive. Late nights in rented offices taught me discipline. The hum of fluorescent lights, the smell of cheap carpet glue, the distant echo of footsteps in hallways that felt abandoned. All of it wrapped around me as I balanced accounts, as I mapped futures. My mirror on the wall became a silent witness. Each time I looked into it, my reflection seemed to ask, is this freedom? Or another cage you're building for yourself? Freedom, I discovered, is not in the money itself, but in the choices it buys. It is the power to walk away, to say no, to breathe when others choke. That power comes not from one paycheck, but from many rivers converging, from the assurance that no single drought can starve you. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. But I must confess, with every stream I built, the weight grew heavier. More streams meant more to manage, more to watch. I would wake in the middle of the night with the sound of rushing water in my ears, unsure if it was real or just the echo of my own mind, wondering if one of the streams had turned against me. Money flows, yes, but it can also flood. I had to learn to channel it, to direct it, to build levees strong enough to hold against the storms. There were mornings when I walked to the office before dawn, the streets slick with rain, the lamps casting long shadows, and I asked myself why I chased this so fiercely. Then I would hear the answer in the steady ticking of my watch, the reminder that time is the only currency that truly matters. Every stream I built was not for the dollars themselves, but for the hours they returned to me. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. I remember the first morning I woke without dread. The blinds let in soft light. The smell of fresh bread from a bakery downstairs drifted through the open window, and for once, I wasn't rushing. I made coffee slowly, savoring it, the steam curling in the sunlight like a quiet promise. That moment was bought by the streams I had built, by the failures I endured, by the nights I refused to quit. And still, I kept going. Because once you've tasted the security of multiple flows, you know you can never go back to the fragility of one. I chased new ventures, some bold, some quiet. I walked through offices buzzing with voices, through warehouses smelling of cardboard and ink, through cafes where meetings blurred into friendships. Each place left an imprint, each venture a lesson, each success and failure a note in the symphony of income streams that became my life. The streams grew into rivers, the rivers into something larger. And as I stood one night by the window of a high-rise office, the city lights stretching endlessly beneath me, I realized wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the number of exits life offers you, the number of doors you can unlock with the keys you've forged along the way. And even then, the clock ticked on. The first time I truly felt the fragility of depending on a single source of income, I was standing in a crowded bank lobby. The air was thick with the smell of damp coats and ink, the kind that seeps into paper forms as people press their pens too hard out of nervousness. My palms were sweaty against the withdrawal slip, and I could hear the ticking of the clock above the teller's window, louder than the murmur of voices around me. When the clerk told me that the payment I expected hadn't arrived, something inside me cracked. It was not just disappointment, it was fear, raw and undeniable. That day, I promised myself I would never again allow my entire life to hinge on one delayed transfer, one late paycheck, one broken promise. That promise became the foundation of everything that followed. At first, I had no strategy. I was like a man stumbling through a dark forest, reaching out blindly for anything that might feel solid. I took jobs others refused, temporary, unstable, low-paying. I worked nights in warehouses where the smell of dust and sweat clung to my clothes until morning. I delivered packages until my legs trembled, each box a reminder that someone else had built a system where I was just a cog. But even in those exhausting hours, I studied, I watched, I listened. I asked myself, what if I built the system instead of serving it? The idea of multiple streams of income was not a revelation that struck me all at once. It was a whisper that grew louder with every failure I witnessed around me. I saw neighbors who lost their homes when one job vanished. I saw friends drowning in debt because a single business collapsed. I saw my father counting coins at night, and I knew one river could dry up overnight. I wanted rivers, many rivers, flowing together until they formed something no drought could erase. The early attempts were crude. I remember buying cheap watches in bulk, trying to resell them on street corners. The smell of cold metal and plastic clung to my fingers as I laid them out on a worn cloth. Some days I sold two, some days none. People passed by with eyes full of indifference, and I learned quickly that not every idea turns into a stream. But even those failures taught me to test, to adapt, to let go quickly before I drowned with a sinking ship. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. The vending machine was my first real taste of freedom. Every Saturday morning, I would unlock it, the metal key cold against my skin, and pull open the coin box. The sound of coins spilling into my hands was intoxicating. It was not much, just enough to cover groceries or rent a little more comfortably. But it was proof that money could flow without me standing there, hour after hour, trading time for it. That proof became an obsession. Soon, I began layering streams, writing assignments, vending machines, small investments, side hustles that came and went like shifting tides. Each one added weight to my schedule, but each one also added security to my life. I worked through nights where the glow of my computer screen was the only light in the room, where the smell of burnt-out wiring and stale coffee mixed in the air. I sacrificed sleep, comfort, even relationships, because I believed in the greater reward waiting on the other side of discipline. But let me be honest, failure never stopped following me. There were ventures that collapsed in spectacular silence days, when I logged in to see balances emptied, partnerships dissolved, opportunities vanished. I would sit in silence, the ticking of the wall clock louder than my own thoughts, wondering if I had been foolish all along. Yet even in those moments, I refused to let myself return to the fragility of one stream. One broken pipe could not drown me if the others kept flowing. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. Over time, I began to see income not as money, but as architecture. Each stream was a pillar, some tall, some short, some still under construction. My task was not to build the tallest pillar, but to make sure the structure stood balanced. I learned to reinvest wisely profits from one stream feeding the next, the way one river might split into smaller channels that nourish distant fields. Real estate became one of those rivers. I bought my first property with trembling hands, the pen scraping across the contract, while my stomach churned with doubt. The smell of fresh paint in that small apartment is still etched in my memory. It was not glamorous. It was not even in a desirable neighborhood. But it was mine. The first time rent money arrived without me lifting a finger, I felt something shift inside me. Ownership was a different kind of power. Then there were digital ventures, selling products online, building websites, experimenting with platforms that never slept. I remember the first night I woke up to see an order placed while I had been dreaming. The glow of my phone screen in the darkness felt almost surreal. Money had moved while I was unconscious. Time and income had finally parted ways. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. Still, with every stream came new lessons. Some streams demanded constant attention, like children tugging at your sleeve. Others matured and stood strong on their own. The trick was learning which ones to nurture and which ones to let go. I held on too long to some failing ventures out of pride, out of fear of being wrong. The losses burned, but they carved into me the wisdom to be ruthless when necessary. Not every stream deserves your devotion. I cannot count the nights I spent staring into a mirror, the fluorescent light above buzzing, asking myself if this was worth it. My reflection often looked like a stranger, tired, hollow-eyed, yet determined. Behind me, stacks of papers, invoices, receipts, notes covered in scribbles that only I could decipher. The mirror never lied, reminded me that building income streams was not just about money, it was about endurance, It was about outlasting doubt, exhaustion, and fear. Eventually, the streams began to hum together, a harmony that replaced the chaos. A paycheck here, a rent payment there, sales from an online store, dividends from an investment, coins rattling in a vending machine. Each note by itself was small, almost insignificant. But together, they formed music. And in that music, I found peace. The greatest lesson I learned was this: wealth is not measured in how much money you hold, but in how many choices you own. Every stream I built was another key on my ring, another door I could open when life closed in my face. Freedom was not the absence of struggle. It was the presence of options. And still, as I write these words, the clock ticks on, reminding me that time is the most precious stream of all. The office at night had its own kind of silence. Not the silence of peace, but of electricity humming through wires, of air vents sighing, of papers rustling when no one touched them. I would sit there, my tie loosened, my sleeves rolled up, staring at numbers that glowed back at me from the screen. They weren't just numbers, they were streams, some trickling, some surging, some barely alive. I had to keep them all flowing, because one alone could never carry me. It's strange how you begin to think in terms of flows rather than sums. I stopped asking, "How much do I have?" and started asking, "How many sources feed me today?" A single paycheck might look large, but it's fragile. Cut it off and the silence that follows is deafening. But when you have many streams, each one whispering in its own rhythm, you begin to feel something different. Security, yes, but also a strange humility. You are not dependent on one master, one deal, one fragile rope. You are building a river delta, wide and alive. The early mornings smelled of ink and damp paper. I'd walk through the city before dawn, streetlights still glowing, bakeries just beginning to open, the scent of fresh bread drifting into the cold. In those walks, I dreamed of streams that hadn't yet been built. Some became reality, others never left the page. But each one mattered, because the dreaming itself was practice. Not all streams were glorious. Some were dull, mechanical, even boring. Insurance policies, small dividends, side hustles that brought in just enough to cover utilities. But those streams gave me something greater than thrill. They gave me peace. I realized that excitement is not the measure of a good stream. Reliability is. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. Then came the riskier streams investments. In people, in ideas, in fragile startups that smelled of coffee and desperation. I sat in small offices where the paint peeled from the walls, listening to young voices pitch dreams larger than their balance sheets. Some of those dreams paid off, others collapsed overnight. I lost money, but I gained something more: understanding. The world does not reward caution alone. It rewards those willing to step into the unknown with open eyes and steady hands. There were times I thought I had gone too far, spreading myself too thin. Managing streams is like juggling keys drop one, and you hear it clatter on the floor, echoing in your mind. But the more I learned, the more I built systems, structures, habits. Spreadsheets filled with numbers became mirrors of my own discipline. And yet, with all the streams, all the numbers, all the keys on my ring. I never stopped hearing the ticking of time. Time. The stream no one can control. The one that slips through every hand, no matter how tightly we close our fists. That's why I built what I built. Not for wealth itself, but to reclaim hours. To wake one morning and not rush. To breathe. To choose. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. Some streams flowed quietly in the background, unnoticed, until I realized how much they had accumulated. Royalties from a piece of work I had almost forgotten about. Rent deposits arriving steadily each month. Dividends reinvested year after year. They grew like ivy, slowly but persistently, covering the walls of my financial life, until one day I looked around and realized they had built a fortress. But even fortresses have cracks. There were betrayals partners who vanished with money, contracts broken, ventures ruined by sudden storms. Each failure left a scar, a reminder carved deep into me. I learned not to panic. One stream drying up no longer meant drowning. It meant redirecting, rebuilding, learning. That was the true gift of multiple streams. Resilience. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. There is a rhythm to building wealth through many channels. It is not glamorous, not like the stories told in glossy magazines. It is repetition, patience, the smell of ink on contracts, the click of calculators, the sound of coins pouring into metal trays. It is the quiet pride of knowing that even if one door locks, another key on your ring will turn somewhere else. And so the streams continued to grow, weaving together into something larger than me. I stood at the window of a high-rise one evening, the city lights burning like stars beneath me, and I understood. Wealth is not having everything. Wealth is never being trapped by one thing. And still, the clock ticked on, reminding me that the real task was not to own streams, but to own my time. The mornings in those years always began the same way, with the sound of the alarm cutting through my sleep like a blade, dragging me back into the world of numbers, schedules, and plans. The room would still be dark, only the faint outline of the window visible, the curtains drawn tight against the city outside. I would sit on the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing on my shoulders, but also the restless fire that refused to let me quit. My body longed for more sleep, but my mind had already begun racing, cataloging streams, thinking about where the water flowed strongest and where it had begun to dry. I brewed coffee that tasted bitter and metallic in the cheap machine I could barely afford. The steam rose, fogging the small window above the sink, and in that fog, I often caught sight of my reflection, blurred, ghost-like, half there. That was who I was then. Someone half in the world of survival, half in the world of dreams. Each day became an experiment in endurance. I juggled the streams. 1 hour spent writing content for a company that would pay late. Another hour tracking sales from vending machines that clinked with coins, but cost me hours of maintenance. Then a meeting with a potential investor who smelled of cologne too strong, masking the nervous sweat beneath his suit. Every face, every smell, every handshake carried with it the question, is this another river or just a mirage? And while I pushed forward, I carried with me the lessons of scarcity. Scarcity is not just the absence of money, it is the presence of fear. It creeps into every decision, every glance at the clock, every sigh at the end of the day. I built streams not only to create wealth, but to silence that fear. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. The vending machines multiplied. I still remember the sound of their metal doors closing, the clunk that echoed in quiet laundromats and school hallways. Each machine had its own personality, one that jammed constantly, another that ate coins without dispensing anything, forcing me to drive across town late at night to fix it. My hands smelled of grease and sugar, my pockets filled with coins that left my fingertips dark with residue. But those machines taught me something no book could: scale. One machine gave me a trickle. 10 gave me a stream. Scale turned effort into flow. At the same time, I ventured into digital territory. Websites built on shaky code, online shops selling items no one wanted at first. I spent nights teaching myself design and copywriting, the glow of the monitor reflecting off my tired eyes. The apartment was silent except for the tapping of keys and the distant hum of the fridge. When the first sale came through, just one order, barely worth the time I had invested, I felt something shift. The world had changed. Money could come in while I slept. Still, nothing came without cost. I sacrificed relationships, missed birthdays, lost touch with friends who could not understand why I spent nights in front of a screen instead of at a bar. Some called me obsessed. Maybe I was. But obsession, I learned, is the bridge between dreaming and reality. Without it, streams never form. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. The failures kept coming, and each one carried its own smell, its own sound. The office where I lost everything smelled of mold and old carpets. The silence after the phone call that ended a deal was broken only by the creak of my chair. But the key was always the same: keep moving. A dead stream is not the end. It is an invitation to dig elsewhere, to open another channel. I built systems to protect myself. Automated transfers, diversified accounts, habits as rigid as the ticking of the clock that watched me every night. I became ruthless with my own time, trimming away the waste, carving out hours as though they were diamonds buried in stone. And yet, with every stream I added, every key I forged, I began to feel the shift from desperation to freedom. Freedom did not arrive with a sudden windfall. It crept in quietly. It was in the morning when I chose not to answer the phone. In the evening when I sat in silence, knowing rent was paid before I even thought about it. In the decision to walk away from one deal without fear of starvation. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. The streams grew into something larger than me. They became not just income, but identity. I was no longer the boy watching his father count coins under dim kitchen light. I was no longer the man trembling at the bank counter, terrified of an empty account. I had become something else, a builder of rivers, a keeper of flows. And still, the clock ticked. It always ticked. Its sound followed me into every room, every deal, every moment of reflection. Because in the end, streams do not buy eternity. They buy hours, choices, fragments of freedom. They buy mornings of quiet coffee, evenings of peace, Afternoons spent not in desperation, but in creation. That, I learned, is the true wealth. Not the coins in your hand, not the numbers on a screen, but the silence you create by building enough streams to drown out the noise of fear. And even as the rivers widened, I knew I had only just begun. The nights stretched longer as the streams multiplied. I remember sitting in a rented office where the walls were painted a dull beige, the kind that absorbs light instead of reflecting it. The desk was secondhand, its surface scarred with scratches and cigarette burns from whoever had used it before me. The smell of stale smoke lingered, mixed with the faint bitterness of instant coffee that I brewed in a cheap machine by the window. That office became my sanctuary, my laboratory. I would sit there, night after night, building, failing, rebuilding. Outside, the city never rested. Sirens in the distance, the hum of traffic even at 3 a.m. Neon lights flickering across wet asphalt. Inside, the ticking of the clock on the wall became my only company. I worked until exhaustion blurred the numbers on the screen. My eyes would burn, my hands stiff from typing. But still, I pushed forward. There was no option to stop. To rely on one stream was to accept fragility, to gamble my life on the goodwill of forces beyond my control. I refused that fate. I had seen too many men crumble when the one thing they depended on was taken from them. The world is merciless. It owes you nothing. But if you learn to build streams, you owe yourself freedom. The vending machines became my first true lesson in systems. I still hear the clatter of coins against the metal tray, smell the faint sweetness of spilled soda syrup that stuck to the soles of my shoes. Each machine was a problem disguised as an opportunity: broken bills, mechanical jams, angry customers. But every time I emptied a coin box, I felt the pulse of passive income, the whisper that told me, if you can do this with 10 machines, you can do it with 100. If you can do it with machines, you can do it with anything. Digital ventures followed. Websites built on shaky foundations, selling products no one wanted at first. The glow of the computer screen painted my face blue in the darkness of my small apartment. The air smelled of burnt dust from an old radiator, the hum of the fridge filling the silence. When the first order appeared, my hands trembled. A stranger, someone I had never met, had trusted me enough to send money. It was a spark, small but undeniable. From that moment, I was addicted, not to the money itself, but to the flow, to the proof that streams could exist beyond my labor. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people, but not every stream flowed smoothly. Some dried up overnight. Partnerships collapsed. Investments failed. I remember the cold dread of opening my bank account and seeing red numbers glowing back at me. The silence of a phone that would not ring with promised payments. Each failure carried its own sound, its own smell. The echo of an empty warehouse, the scent of cardboard left too long in damp air, the hollow click of a lock turning on a door I could no longer afford to open. Yet each loss carved me sharper. I learned to cut ties faster, to pivot with less hesitation. Streams, I realized, are not meant to last forever. Some are seasonal, some fleeting, some permanent. The trick is not to hold on, but to keep building. Always keep building. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like it supports the journey. The turning point came when I understood leverage, not just financial, but personal. My time was limited. My energy was finite. To multiply streams, I had to multiply myself. I hired people, cautiously at first. The smell of fresh ink on contracts filled my office, the scratch of pens against paper echoing like the start of something larger. Delegation was terrifying. Trusting others with pieces of my vision felt like handing them fragments of my soul. Some betrayed that trust. Others rose higher than I ever could have alone. Ownership became my obsession. A job pays you once. Ownership pays you endlessly. I bought my first property, a small, unimpressive apartment with peeling paint and a faulty boiler. The air inside smelled of mildew. The floors creaked. But it was mine. When the first rent payment arrived, I felt something break loose inside me. Money had moved while I had done nothing. The river had widened. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. I diversified further: stocks, royalties, licensing deals, side hustles that others laughed at until they saw the returns. I sold ideas, not just products. I built systems that whispered in the background, their hum almost imperceptible, until I looked up one day and realized how much they had grown. Yet even in success, I never escaped the ticking of the clock. Time was always there, stalking me, reminding me that no amount of streams could buy eternity. They could only buy fragments, hours stolen back from labor, moments of choice. I began to value those fragments more than any sum in my accounts. The quiet morning when I brewed coffee slowly instead of rushing out the door. The afternoon when I turned off my phone and walked through the city aimlessly. The smell of roasted chestnuts and exhaust filling the air. The evening when I sat in silence, no longer haunted by fear of collapse. That, I realized, is the true purpose of multiple streams of income. Not wealth for its own sake, not status or vanity, but freedom. The freedom to choose, the freedom to breathe, the freedom to listen to the ticking clock and, instead of fear, hear only rhythm. And so I kept building. Streams into rivers, rivers into oceans. Always searching, always constructing. Because once you've tasted freedom, you can never return to chains. And even now, as I look back, the streams continue to flow. Some strong, some weak, some barely visible. But together, they carry me forward. The clock ticks on, and I keep listening. There were years when I measured my life not in birthdays, not in seasons, but in cash flows. I could tell you exactly which month a particular stream was born, which quarter it dried up, which week it doubled without warning. My calendar was a map of income, colored not by holidays or celebrations, but by launches, closures, payouts, and deadlines. It was an odd way to live, perhaps, but for me, it became second nature. I had learned early on that when you only have one source, you live in constant suspense, like holding your breath underwater, waiting for the moment you can surface. But with many streams, you breathe differently. You exhale slowly, calmly, because you know another breath is always waiting. I still remember the first time I felt truly safe. Not rich, not triumphant, just safe. It was a gray morning, the kind where the sky hangs low and the city feels half asleep. I sat at my kitchen table, a chipped mug of coffee warming my hands. and for once the taste wasn't bitter. The bills stacked in front of me. Electricity, rent, insurance were already covered, not by one job or one deal, but by half a dozen streams humming quietly in the background. The relief was so profound, it felt like silence filling the room. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and listened to nothing. That nothingness was wealth. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. But the path to that silence was carved in noise, constant, relentless noise. Phones ringing, machines breaking, emails piling up. Every new stream demanded attention at first, like a newborn crying for food. Some never stopped crying, draining me more than they gave back. Others grew strong and independent, paying me steadily with little effort. It took me years to learn which ones to nurture and which to abandon. Pride made me cling to failing ventures longer than I should have. I told myself that persistence would turn them around, but persistence without profit is just stubbornness wearing a disguise. I lost money, sometimes more than I could afford. I lost sleep, too, and health. There were weeks when I lived on instant noodles, the smell of cheap seasoning clinging to my clothes, because every spare dollar went into keeping streams alive. Looking back, I realized those sacrifices weren't just about money. They were about buying proof that my vision could work. Each failure cut me down, but each success rebuilt me stronger, sharper. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. Over time, I developed rules, quiet, personal laws that guided me. Never depend on one client. Never invest more than I could afford to lose. Always build something small and steady alongside something bold and risky. The steady streams, rent, royalties, dividends were like the heartbeat. The risky streams, the startups, the ventures with strangers in cramped offices and coffee-stained contracts were like lightning. I needed both, heartbeat and lightning, stability and growth. Real estate expanded slowly. I can still recall the smell of sawdust and wet paint from renovations, the metallic echo of empty apartments waiting to be filled. Each property was a seed, planted in soil I could see and touch. Tenants came and went, some paying faithfully, others leaving headaches behind. But the rent kept flowing, a rhythm that became the spine of my financial life. The digital world was different. It was invisible, intangible. Orders appeared like ghosts in the night, money moving across servers while I slept. The thrill of waking up to new sales never faded. I would sit up in bed, the blue glow of my phone lighting the darkness, and feel the strange satisfaction of having earned without lifting a finger. Yet with that came vulnerability too. Algorithms changed, platforms rose and collapsed, trends shifted like sand. I learned not to worship the platforms, but to master the principle. Streams must flow from everywhere, not just one fragile source. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. I began to see money less as currency and more as water. Left standing still, it stagnates. Put into motion, it nourishes. I built channels and reservoirs, guiding the flow so that one stream could feed another. Profit from vending machines went into the first property. Rent from the property funded online ventures. Online profits seeded investments. Each stream birthed another, like rivers branching into a delta. There were nights when exhaustion felt like it would consume me, when my body slumped against the desk, head resting on papers smudged with ink. The lamp buzzed overhead, casting shadows across my reflection in the dark window. I would stare at that reflection, wondering if I was chasing freedom or chaining myself to endless pursuit. The answer was never simple. Freedom costs energy. Freedom costs years. But the price of dependence is heavier still. If you've ever tasted the fragility of one paycheck, you know. You know why I built what I built. And so, I pressed on, through failures that emptied my accounts, through betrayals that left me staring at locked doors, through nights when the only sound in the room was the ticking clock, reminding me of every second lost. I pressed on because I knew. A single stream can betray you, but a river of many never will. And even now, as the streams flow steadily, I keep building. Not out of greed, but out of respect. For time, for freedom, for the silence I fought so long to earn. The streams are my fortress. The streams are my freedom. And still, the clock ticks on. The seasons changed, but for me the rhythm of life was not measured in summer heat or winter frost. It was measured in deposits, payouts, and balances. While others marked their calendars with holidays and family gatherings, I marked mine with dividends, rent days, contract renewals. The streams had become my calendar, my heartbeat. I did not celebrate Christmas with gifts. I celebrated the month when 3 different checks arrived on the same day. I did not dread Mondays. I dreaded droughts. That was the way my mind had been rewired by the pursuit of multiple incomes. And yet, beneath that obsession was always a memory. A kitchen table, coins counted under a weak bulb. My father's hands rough from work, his sighs louder than his words. That memory was the soil in which everything grew. It reminded me that no matter how far I climbed, no matter how wide the river spread, I was building not for luxury, but for survival. Freedom was not a luxury, it was oxygen. The early mornings smelled of dust and ambition. I often rose before the sun, the city still cloaked in quiet. The streets were slick with dew, the air sharp and cold, and in that silence, I felt closest to possibility. My shoes echoed on empty sidewalks as I walked to offices that seemed abandoned, lights flickering only in a handful of windows, where others like me worked against the clock. Inside, the hum of fluorescent lights became my soundtrack. Papers stacked on desks, the smell of cheap ink thick in the air, old radiators clanging faintly. I sat there, carving out streams from nothing. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. The vending machines kept multiplying. I drove through neighborhoods in the dead of night, headlights cutting through fog, a jingling box of coins rattling on the passenger seat. I unlocked machines in empty laundromats where the air smelled of detergent and loneliness. I restocked sodas in schools long after the students had gone home, the faint echo of laughter still hanging in the hallways. The coins stained my hands, but they also built my confidence. Each machine was a soldier in my army of streams. Then came writing, consulting, small projects I could do with nothing but a pen and my restless mind. Words became my second river. I sold copy to businesses, advice to strangers, ideas to anyone willing to listen. The click of keyboards became as familiar to me as the rattle of coins. And slowly, the streams began to weave together, feeding one another, creating something larger than I had imagined. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. But every step forward carried failure in its shadow. I remember the smell of mold in an office I couldn't afford to heat, the silence of a phone that no longer rang with orders. I remember the sharp sting of betrayal from a partner who disappeared with money that wasn't his. I remember sleepless nights staring at numbers that refused to add up, whispering to myself that I had made a mistake, that perhaps all this effort was nothing but foolishness dressed in ambition. And yet I always returned to the streams. Failure, I discovered, is not the end of a river. It is a bend, a split, a redirection. You lose one channel, but another opens. The flow never stops if you keep digging. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. Real estate taught me patience. The smell of plaster and paint, the sound of hammers and drills, the frustration of broken pipes and leaky roofs, all of it became part of my education. Each property was a test of endurance, but also a seed. Rent did not arrive in floods, it arrived in steady drops, and those drops over time filled the bucket. The digital world taught me speed. Trends shifted like winds. One day, a product sold hundreds. The next day, nothing. I learned to adapt, to pivot quickly, to never anchor myself too tightly to one platform, one method. The streams in that world were unpredictable, but when they flowed, they surged like a storm-fed river. And through it all, I heard the ticking clock. Always the clock. At times it mocked me, its steady rhythm reminding me of hours wasted, of youth burned in fluorescent-lit rooms. At other times it comforted me, its pulse steady, constant, a reminder that time, though fleeting, was still mine to command. If you build streams wisely, time becomes your ally. You stop chasing it, stop fearing it. You begin to buy it back, minute by minute, hour by hour. And when you buy back time, you buy back life. That is what multiple streams gave me, not just money, not just safety, but mornings of choice, afternoons of silence, evenings where I could look into the mirror and see not fear, but freedom. And still, the rivers grew, each one carrying me further from scarcity, closer to peace. Yet even as they widened, I never forgot the kitchen table, the coins, the sighs. That memory kept me honest. It reminded me that the true purpose of building streams is not to drown in wealth, but to breathe without fear. The streams are my freedom. The streams are my legacy. And still, the clock ticks on. The rivers of income never appeared overnight. They were dug with bare hands, with sleepless eyes, with years of patience when nothing seemed to move. I remember entire winters when I lived more in the glow of computer screens than in the daylight of the sun. The windows of my apartment would frost over, my breath visible in the air, because the heating bill had gone unpaid for too long. Still, I sat there, bundled in 2 coats, typing out contracts, researching ideas, sending proposals to strangers who might never answer. The smell of burnt dust from the radiator filled the air, and behind it, the sharp bite of cold that no blanket could truly soften. That was the soil in which the streams began to take root. There were days when failure felt endless. Deals collapsed. Machines broke. Products gathered dust in boxes stacked against the wall, their cardboard edges softening as damp air seeped into the room. I carried those boxes myself down narrow staircases, the smell of mildew clinging to me, knowing I would sell them for a fraction of what I had paid. My hands blistered, my back ached, and I wondered if I had been delusional all along. But failure is deceptive. It feels like an ending when it is only a bend in the river. Each loss stripped me raw, but also reshaped me, forced me to see differently, forced me to adapt. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. The vending machines became a strange kind of teacher. Each time I knelt down to repair a jammed slot, the smell of syrup thick in the air, I told myself, this is leverage, not glamorous, not profound, but proof that money could flow without my constant presence. The clink of coins filling a tray was not just sound. It was reassurance. It was stability. 10 machines became 20. 20 became 30. And still, I drove through empty streets at night, a key ring heavy in my pocket, the metallic jingle echoing like music. The digital streams were noiseless but powerful. Sales notifications arriving while I slept felt like whispers from the future. I would wake in the dark, the room still, the clock ticking on the wall, and my phone glowing faintly with a new order. That glow became a kind of light inside me, proof that income could be unshackled from time, that I could break free from the equation of hours traded for dollars. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. I made mistakes. Some streams that looked promising drained me more than they ever gave back. I poured hours into ventures that barely broke even, and the fatigue carved lines into my face. Pride often kept me tied to failures longer than reason allowed. I learned the hard way that not every river is worth defending. Some must be abandoned so that others can grow. Cutting a stream is painful. It feels like betrayal, like burying a part of yourself. But discipline demands it. Ownership changed everything. The first property I bought smelled of plaster dust and damp wood, the kind of place most people would walk past without a second glance. The boiler rattled, the walls peeled, the floor creaked. But it was mine. And when the first tenant's rent landed in my account, I realized I had crossed a line I could never return from. I had moved from laborer to owner, from trading time to trading patience. Rent did not care if I was awake, if I was tired, if I was present. It simply arrived, steady as rain. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. From there, the streams branched further. Dividends reinvested quietly. Royalties trickled in from work I had long forgotten. Side businesses bloomed and withered, each leaving behind seeds for the next. Some streams gushed with energy. Others whispered faintly in the background. Together, they created harmony. But wealth is not a straight road. It is a labyrinth. I was betrayed more than once. Partners vanished. Contracts dissolved without warning. Some nights I stared at locked office doors, the echo of my own footsteps haunting me, as I realized I had been left alone to carry the weight. The air in those empty spaces was heavy, stale, carrying the scent of failure. But I walked out each time, carrying scars, carrying lessons, never carrying regret. Because even betrayal teaches you where to place your trust next time. Through it all, the clock remained. Ticking, always ticking. Sometimes cruel, sometimes kind. It measured my sacrifices, my late nights, my lost years. It also measured my victories, the mornings when I could finally breathe without fear, the afternoons when I chose silence over struggle, the evenings when I walked through the city without calculating every coin in my pocket. If you build enough streams, time itself begins to change. You no longer chase it. You begin to own fragments of it. You begin to buy back your life in minutes, hours, days. That is the true purpose, not the numbers in your account, not the pride of achievement, but the return of time that scarcity once stole. And so I continued, stream after stream, river after river. Not for glory, not for applause, but for the quiet moments, the chipped mug of coffee on a winter morning, the walk through a city street without fear, the silence of a night when the only sound is the clock ticking, and you know you are safe. The streams became my shield. The streams became my freedom. And still, the clock ticks on. There were nights when I felt like the streams were the only thing keeping me alive, as though the flow of money through different channels had become a second bloodstream inside me. I would sit at my desk long after midnight, the room lit only by a single lamp, the glass of water beside me warm from neglect, and listen to the silence that was never quite silent. There was the buzz of the lamp itself, faint and steady. There was the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. There was the ticking of the wall clock that had become a constant witness to my battles. And beneath it all, there was the sound of my own breathing, slow, heavy, determined. I often wondered if I was sacrificing too much, if the price of building freedom was the very life I was trying to protect. Friends drifted away, their laughter echoing in bars and living rooms I no longer visited. Relationships wilted under the weight of my obsession. I carried guilt in my chest like a stone, but each time I considered slowing down, the memory of my father counting coins pulled me forward again. Scarcity is a wound that never truly heals. You can cover it with comfort, but the scar tissue remains. And every time I touched that scar, I knew I had no choice but to keep building. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. The vending machines taught me consistency. The digital stores taught me speed. But it was real estate that taught me patience. I still recall the first time I stood in an empty apartment I had just purchased. The air smelled of dust and paint thinner. The windows streaked with dirt that blurred the view of the city outside. The floor creaked under my feet, and every sound echoed too loudly in the emptiness. It was not beautiful. It was not glamorous. But it was mine, and it promised something that no job ever could. Permanence. When the first rent arrived, I felt a peace unlike anything I had known before. It was not joy, not triumph. It was the quiet reassurance that a part of my life was no longer fragile. The digital ventures, in contrast, were alive with volatility. Some days orders flooded in, notifications lighting up my phone until I silenced it out of exhaustion. Other days were barren, the silence so sharp it felt like failure. I learned to ride those waves without drowning, to see the patterns, to adapt before the tide turned against me. The streams that once terrified me began to feel like living creatures, temperamental, unpredictable, but powerful if treated with respect. If my words resonate with you, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and leave a like. It supports the journey. There were betrayals too. Partners who smiled in meetings but vanished when debts came due. Colleagues who promised loyalty but chased their own gains when the moment arrived. Each betrayal felt like ice in my veins, a reminder that trust is a fragile currency in business. But with multiple streams, betrayal never destroyed me completely. One stream could fail, but others carried me until I rebuilt. That resilience became my armor. I learned to think of money not as wealth, but as water. It must move. It must be directed. Leave it stagnant and it rots. Guide it and it nourishes. Every profit I made was divided, flowing into new channels, feeding the streams that would one day feed me. The discipline of reinvestment was harsh. I denied myself comforts others enjoyed. No new clothes, no vacations, no indulgences. I poured everything back into the rivers, and slowly they widened. Support this channel by subscribing and sharing your dream below. But freedom is not found in the streams alone. It is found in the time they return to you. I remember the first morning I woke without the alarm, the sunlight creeping through thin curtains, the sound of traffic muted by distance. I sat with my coffee and realized that for once, I was not rushing, not calculating, not gasping for air. The bills were covered before I even thought of them. The streams had bought me silence. That silence was worth more than any luxury, more than any number on a screen. Still, I never stopped building. Because streams are like gardens, they must be tended, expanded, protected. I added new ventures, some born from opportunity, others from necessity. Some grew fast and strong, others withered quietly. I pruned, planted, harvested. My life became an endless cycle of cultivation. The clock never let me forget the truth. Time is the only stream that cannot be widened. It flows relentlessly, indifferent to effort, deaf to ambition. That is why I built what I built, to buy fragments of it back, to carve out spaces where time moved on my terms, not someone else's. And so I sit here now, the river's still flowing, the keys to many doors heavy in my hand. I do not claim victory. I do not claim perfection. I claim only persistence. The persistence to dig, to fail, to rebuild, to keep water moving until silence replaced fear. The streams are my fortress. The streams are my freedom. And still, the clock ticks on. The older I grew, the more I understood that the streams I had built were not just for me. They were not trophies, not medals to hang on a wall. They were bridges, bridges for the people who would come after me. Bridges away from the fragile life I had once known. My children, my family, my partners. They would not sit at kitchen tables counting coins beneath weak bulbs. They would not feel the cold fear of a single paycheck hanging above them like a thread ready to snap. That was why I endured. That was why I bled into the rivers until they ran steady on their own. The noise of ambition faded with time. The late nights in empty offices, the smell of burnt coffee, the tension of contracts, they softened into memory. What remained was the rhythm of the streams, steady, reliable, humming in the background of my days. They gave me mornings of choice, afternoons of silence, evenings of peace. I no longer chased wealth. I chased presence. I chased time with the people I loved. Time to walk slowly. Time to breathe fully. Don't forget to subscribe, to leave a comment, and to press the like button before we dive deeper. Every gesture helps this message reach more people. If I could leave you with one truth, it is this: never build your life on a single stream. No matter how strong it seems, no matter how steady it flows, one disruption can leave you gasping. Build many. Some loud, some quiet. Some risky, some steady. Let them weave together until they form a river too wide to dry. And then use that river not to drown in luxury, but to buy back the only currency that matters: time. Because in the end, when the numbers fade, when the contracts gather dust, when even the coins lose their shine, all that remains is the clock. It ticks for us all. And the streams you build are not a way to stop it. They are a way to listen to its rhythm without fear. If you stayed with me until the end, subscribe, like, and comment, so that these words will find you again tomorrow night.